For some people, till death do you part just doesn't apply. Linda Chase was a woman who had been through a number of unfortunate relationships, but when she met Charles Ziegler, things were different. Things were better. Linda and Charles did many things together, but one of their favorites was just sitting back and watching NASCAR. Linda loved it so much that even Charles' death couldn't keep them from their special time together. Cleaned and dressed, Linda propped Charles up in his favorite chair, where he remained for 18 months as he decomposed and decomposed and decomposed. I find this impressive, considering I can't even watch NASCAR for 10 minutes. Linda was eventually caught after one of Charles' family members contacted police after not hearing from him for a long period of time. It turned out Linda had been cashing in on Charles' benefit checks. However, money was not a motivator for keeping Charles' body just hanging around the house. She claimed she was simply lonely, and he was the only man that was ever nice to her. Charles was determined to have died from natural causes. Jean Stevens is a woman who is all about family, most especially her twin sister and husband. At 80 years old, Jean was heartbroken and devastated over the passing of her husband James, who she had been with for over 60 years. She was so heartbroken that she had James's body privately exhumed shortly after his burial. She brought him home, changed him into a dark suit and tie, and sat him down on the couch inside her garage. James was finally back home. Jean had escaped the tragedy of death for 10 years before her twin sister, June, had succumbed to cancer. Jean had her sister buried in her backyard, and when no one was in sight, promptly dug her back up. She set June's body down on a couch in a spare room right off of her bedroom, where she would often spray June with her favorite perfume and doll her up with makeup. Jean would often talk to the bodies and forget that they were dead at all. That was until authorities dropped by and discovered the bodies, after a call from a relative of her late husband's. The bodies were taken from Jean and she was barred from seeing them. She had managed to cheat death. However, the authorities cheated her, until authorities offered her a deal. If she were to build an above-ground vault for the bodies, she could have them back. So that's exactly what she's done. With enough room for 8 bodies, she is insistent on keeping more than just her sister and husband there. Currently at 94 years old, Jean will one day soon join them. Some families prefer to keep to themselves, and some families have a very good reason for doing so. Margaret Bernstorff lived with her brother and 2 sisters in a large green and white Victorian house. Here they had resided since their parents moved there in the 1920s. Seldom involved in public affairs, neighbors began to take notice when Margaret's siblings disappeared one by one. They would ask Margaret where her brother had been or where her sisters had been, and she'd claim they'd either moved or that they were ill. Neighbors often reached out to Margaret to see if she ever needed any favors, such as a ride to the doctors, but Margaret would always decline. Though she was sternly independent, people found her to be a kind and generous woman who would smile a lot and often pick flowers to give to people around the neighborhood, though authorities would find something much, much different. Truth be told, Margaret's sisters, Anita and Elaine, and her brother Frank, had never left that old house. When authorities were called, the bodies of all 3 siblings were discovered, draped with blankets in different areas of the house. It was discovered that Margaret's sister Anita had died just months before the discovery, while Frank had been there for 5 years, and Elaine, she had been dead in that house for over 30. Margaret herself passed away in 2011. Born in Germany, Karl Tanzler came to America and became a very skilled radiologist. He came in touch with many tuberculosis patients throughout his career, but one was just slightly different. When Maria Hoyos came to Karl for treatment, he immediately recognized her. You see, when Karl was a child, he had a vision. A dead ancestor appeared and revealed to him who the love of his life would be, and Maria fit the description. Despite Carl's best efforts, Maria died of tuberculosis in 1931, leaving Carl alone and heartbroken. He insisted to Maria's family that he pay for her funeral and also for the construction of an above-ground tomb for Maria's body, and her family happily accepted. Carl came to know the ins and outs of this tomb very well. I say that because he was in and out of it all the time. After work, Carl would use a key to enter the tomb and would often sleep beside Maria's decomposing body. That would last for months until Carl couldn't take it anymore. One night, he picked up Maria's body and brought it back home with him. Maria had decomposed substantially, so Carl began putting Maria back together by joining her bones with piano wire and stuffing her body with rags. A girl must keep her figure, after all. As her skin fell away, he'd replace it with silk soaked in wax. As her hair clumped off, he replaced it with a wig made of her own hair. As her eyes sunk and rotted, he replaced them with glass ones. It would take 9 years before authorities discovered what would appear to be a human-sized doll, laying in Carl's bed with glistening skin and dead, glazed eyes. And though Carl was found competent to stand trial, the statute of limitations prevented a conviction. At the family's request, an autopsy was performed which had confirmed everything Carl had done to the body, with some reports claiming that he even fixed the body so that he could have sex with it. Maria's body was patched up and laid to rest in an unmarked grave, so that Carl couldn't go back and repeat what he had done before. Over a decade later, Carl was found in his new home, dead. Within it was a life-size effigy he had made of Maria shortly after their separation. Some reports claim he had died in its arms. Some people like to say that love lasts forever, but perhaps they meant obsession. That's all for now. Remember, you may not believe it, but anything is possible in a world so seriously strange. I'm Rob Dyke, and I'll see you next Wednesday. Please be sure to show the artist of this series some love by liking her fan page linked in the description below. Also, if you haven't, please subscribe to my channel, because you won't want to miss what's next.